It's at this point, I'll come back to you, sir. It's at this point I want to come back to Professor Tia. There are those who argue that perhaps how we did the cleansing of our Washington embassy, for instance, could contribute to how we eventually ended up on that list. And I'm sure you remember you followed the Foreign Affairs Minister, Samuel Okudzeto Ablakwa, the revelation that indeed our visa issuance had an issue because, you know, we're diverting monies that were supposed to come to Ghana to an individual pocket because of the conflict of interest contract, as it were, that allowed that to happen. To what extent do you think this might have contributed to where we are now?
Well, I don't know the extent to which it contributed to this. I know that it's been mentioned as one of the reasons, but of course, we know that I think that the consensus seems to be that the approach that the Honorable Foreign Minister took was a little bit knee-jerk, and it wasn't probably well thought through. So it created some challenges. Some people had applied for visas. They had to be rescheduled. They had to be cancelled. And some had to rebook their flights and so on. So it caused some inconvenience, certainly. But I don't think it really shook the boat to the extent that the U.S. government will use that as a basis to determine whether Ghanaians should have the opportunity to travel to the U.S. on which kind of visa and for what time frame and so on. I think, as has been said, the whole idea of this policy is a sort of anti-immigration policy that not only the Trump administration but some governments and political parties in Europe as well has been undertaken. And even just yesterday or even today, the Roman Catholic Church in Poland has had to question the government's policy over immigration. And so there's also some countries which are even refusing to accept refugees at all. But we all have, there's an international law instrument on refugees that says that so long as you are being persecuted, you have the right to seek asylum anywhere in the world. But here's a situation where some governments are saying that even if you claim to be a refugee, we will not let you near our shores at all. So those anti-immigrant policies, which is mixed up with xenophobia and racism, is driving some of these policies. And that is what we need to look at.
And so you perhaps agree with those who think that beyond the overstays that we're talking about, perhaps there is a more deeper problem beneath what we are seeing. Some even call it a test of sovereignty, as it were.
Yes, certainly. Those policies are what seem to be making parties win power now with regard to the U.S., for example, and some parts of Europe. So if you ride on that wave and come to power, you want to take some steps which will satisfy the citizenry that this is indeed what you fought for, or this is what you campaigned for, and you won, and therefore do it for us. But in most of these situations, the citizens that crave for these policies to be implemented look at the issue from a short-sighted perspective. And so at the end of the day, the country is going to lose as well. It's not only those countries from especially Africa and so on that citizens want to travel to the U.S. who will be at the losing end. The U.S. is losing, actually, in terms of the amount of money, for example, that goes into students that travel to study. Statistics indicate that more than 60% pay on their own. And even those that win scholarship from their universities in the U.S. or even the U.S. government, the benefits that these universities and the U.S. government gain from these scholarships are more than what the scholarships can give them. At the end of the day, what the benefits that go to the U.S. So at the end of the day, those policies need to be rethought. And the policy of, for example, branding a country as a security risk, therefore nobody at all should move from that country to the US is completely wrong. I think that it should be a case-by-case basis. After all, when you are going for the visa, you are interviewed, they look at your criminal record, they look at a number of detailed search. And I think that should be a basis to check if somebody qualifies to enter the country or not.
And
when the person enters the country and doesn't come back, we cannot blame the person who entered the country and found a way to remain in the country. It is up to the security or the authorities in that country to check on these things. And so that is, these are some of the issues that we need to be assessed critically to be able to determine whether these policies can work and is it to the benefit of the US or just to satisfy the citizenry who are craving for such policies without thinking through them, or whose judgments and behaviors are influenced by xenophobic tendencies and ideas.
And we'll be going into the issue of reciprocity very shortly, which has also come up very strongly. We've seen the response of some other African countries like Nigeria and others who have been placed on this. But very briefly, just for clarity, before we go for our break and come back to have that conversation and the way forward, I just wanted clarity from you, Prof. You said that the action by the Foreign Affairs Minister as regards how the cleansing of our U.S. Our embassy in U.S. Was knee-jerk. How do you mean by that, and how did you expect him to deal with the matter? Just very briefly before we go for that break.
Probably they were overwhelmed by the scandal. It is something that is quite a serious issue. And so the fact that it has lingered on and some people have benefited from it so much brought some sort of shame to the embassy. And so there was a need to react quickly and to do something to clear that name, especially in order not to taint the current government, the new regime, with any sort of involvement in that particular illegal practice. So the decision to close down the embassy temporarily is what I think was not a proper step to take. The embassy could have remained open. They would have found ways to deal with that particular problem and even create new office temporarily to still allow visa applications to be reviewed and granted and so on. But to close the embassy completely for that length of time is what I think was not a proper step to take.